before we give you my catalogue of music, let me introduce you to the General Manager of Mushroom Music Publishing, Mr. Adrian Murray.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon all. Yes, you shouldn't leave me with that. I do have a PowerPoint presentation. I can't say I put it together myself though, so I'm halfway between Tony G'day and the real world, I guess. Now, while you've all been at the conference today, the music industry has been ticking along. Mushroom this morning just found out that from 2011 we'll be representing the Rodgers and Hammerstein catalogue for Australia and New Zealand. So if by chance you're getting bored, I'm going to start doing the rest of the presentation in either Maria from The Sound of Music or from Oklahoma. I'm not sure which one you prefer, but keep an eye out for that. Thanks to Tony and his team for giving us an external industry a chance to come and have a chat to you guys. Tony stressed to me that the whole idea about us being involved today is all about dialogue between our two industries, and that's what we're here for. So, as Tony mentioned, my name's Adrian Murray. I've been with Mushroom for about 15 years. I've covered a few different areas of the business. I started off as a very junior person in royalties, paying our artists, moved on to licensing, which covers use of music and film, TV, advertising, gaming, etc. And for the past 3 or 4 years I've been our general manager. Now, in terms of when Tony asked us to come along today and speak, we did go through the hierarchy to see who should come along and speak to you, and we started with our chairman, Michael Gudinskis. And Michael doesn't actually use a computer. He didn't spend his youth playing video games. He spent his youth charging racegoers to park on his parents' front lawn, which I guess is in its infancy was a version of Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto South Caulfield. I'm not sure if it's going to take off in the gaming industry. I then went to our managing director, Ian James, who's here today, and his anecdotes on music are far better than mine, so that's why I dragged him along. I did ask him about his youth, and I said, do you know who Pac-Man is? And he said, I'm not quite sure, but I think we released his second album. Wasn't that Tupac? So it moved on to me, and my history in gaming goes back to Christmas 1986 and a Commodore 64 computer and a game called Rock and Wrestle, which I'm not sure if you can all remember it. The game was ordinary, but the soundtrack to it, which kept on going over and over and over again, was a Casio-inspired monotonous tune. And if you're looking for inspiration as to how music has changed in the gaming industry, just Google YouTube C64 Rock and Wrestle and go through 5 minutes of that tune. Believe me, everything has changed. Now, just clicking through to the PowerPoint presentation, integral component of Michael Gudinskis' Mushroom Group of companies. The big question is, well, I'm telling you who we are, but most people ask us, aren't you Mushroom Records? So some brief history of where we fit into the industry. Michael did set up Mushroom Records in 1972 with the release of an album, a triple album I think it was, even though I wasn't quite born, on a music festival called Sunbury, which most of you are not old enough to remember. Michael saw a hole in the industry where local artists weren't being supported, so he started signing blues artists. That was his theory from the start. Soon after realising there was money elsewhere within the industry, he set up other entities, one of which soon after was Mushroom Music Publishing, which is the company that I specifically work for. And we represent songwriters and composers. Along the way, he also set up additional companies such as Premier Artists. They're a booking agency booking pub gigs, which is another part of Michael's history. He actually was setting up dances and band gigs at various town halls around Melbourne, and that's another way he got his start in the industry. I think it's great that Tony's, by the way, put us in a band room today. It's pretty obvious that it's a Melbourne band room because there's a big column in the middle, so no one can see. From Premier Artists then in the late 70s, Michael put together Frontier Touring, who are Australia's biggest touring company now. everything comes full circle. Michael toured the Police, the band The Police, that is, in the early 80s, and we also did their final tour about 18 months ago now, through madness like Guns N' Roses out at the Calder Thunderdome, and through to the recent Sound Relief concerts, specifically the Melbourne one, which raised about $7 million for bushfire relief. So the touring game is still going strong for Michael. And then other diversifications such as tour merchandising through a model called ATM. The theory was that if Michael wasn't recording them, publishing them, touring them, then at least he had the t-shirts. Now, I did mention Michael did set up Mushroom Records, which is probably what he's most famous for as the founder of Mushroom Records. In the late 90s, the Mushroom Records label was actually sold off to News Corp, who did things with it, for want of a better description. It was then more recently on-sold to Warner Music. So the Mushroom Records label name is still operating as its own label. Michael actually retained ownership of all of the other music and entertainment related companies in the empire. So the thing he's most famous for probably in the general public's eye is Mushroom Records. That's the only thing we don't have as part of the Mushroom name. That was from the late 90s, and then Michael diversified further from there, such as through Mushroom Pictures, who are probably most famous for the film Chopper. Also, more recently, doing some SBS-related TV series on music, and funnily enough, we were also behind Macbeth, which got mentioned earlier. Sometimes you come up with diamonds, and sometimes you don't. To replace, well, not necessarily replace the Mushroom Records label, but when Mushroom Records was sold off, there were about 45 active recording artists on our books at the time, which in the late 90s in the music industry was just absolutely nuts. So it's not necessarily replacement labels, but since Mushroom Records was sold off, Michael has set up various labels, the Liberation Music label, and part of our team is Ivy League Records and a younger company called Elusive, which is actually run by Michael's son Matt. So the family is certainly within the organisation. Then other entities like Roundhouse Entertainment, who do a lot of gigs. A Day on the Green is the main gigs they're known for, which is basically artists from around the world playing at Victorian and Australian wineries, which has been hugely successful. Mushroom Marketing, which looks for corporate relationships between, funnily enough, corporates and the music industry. Mushroom Interactive, for instance, as well, which is, we've got a co-production and development project in place with Archeron Design in Melbourne. So 37 years on, we are still a Mushroom group of companies and still 100% Australian owned by Michael and his partners. So we haven't gone the way of the majors. We're still very much independent and very much Australian, which is very important. So where I think I'd head next is, so what is music publishing in terms of Mushroom Music Publishing? What is it you do, and why are you different from a record label? The general public, and also a lot of designers or early producers, be it film, TV or otherwise, tend not to know what music publishing is. The best way to look at it is when you're talking about one song, there's actually two copyrights you need to consider. There is the publishing copyright, which is actually for the songwriter or the composer, for the original creators of the song as such, for the musical work. Now there is also the separate copyright in a master recording. So that is for the specific recorded performance by the recording artist. Now, a lot of designers and producers in here, that's the important thing to remember when you're going to use, or when you're looking to use a song in one of your projects. You